Welcome to the Food Startups Podcast.
Hey Danny, hold on for one more second here. I'm just finishing my morning routine.
What is going on in your routine, Matt?
Well, I don't know if I've told you this, but for the last 3 months, every day, at least a half an hour before eating, I mix a teaspoon or a little bit less of baking soda with water.
Interesting. Why do you do that? What's the reason for it?
Well, I do it because I want to balance my pH. I want to become more alkaline. It's well known that foods like milk and meat and refined sugar, all of these things contribute to your body being acidic. It's also known, according to Dr. Whitaker here, that alkaline substance helps buffer acids and keep pH in check. And people that have kidney disease, hypertension, they have a really hard time removing acid from the body.
Okay. Yeah, I think I've heard about baking soda before because my mom is a pharmacist and she's told me to take it myself. And sometimes I don't have the time to kind of work on my habits like you do, because my habits kind of suck. But my dad has been taking baking soda for a long time because he has had bouts of cancer before. And so there's this weird thing going on. We're talking about alkalinity and acidity. And so baking soda is something that's alkaline, right, Matt? And it reduces acidity, which has been shown, I think, to perhaps increase rates of cancer growth. Or is this stuff proven? What's the reason why you kind of decided to buy into baking soda?
Sure. Well, history, this is something that for a long time, in the US, baking soda was a very universal treatment for the common cold. And there's tons and tons of other uses. I guess for me, I'm personally always interested in kind of contrarian types of treatments, usually being alternative, because I realize there is a lack of incentives. Big pharma cannot make money off baking soda because of the low price it's at. They can't patent it like they can with other types of prescription drugs.
So you're telling me that baking soda might be more powerful in its effects on the body for perhaps treating a cold, or on the other hand, even reducing the potential for cancer to grow. But because no one's putting money into it because it's so cheap, then we're never going to find out.
Yeah, well, I believe in baking soda more as a preventative approach, but I do know that there has been work going on at Arizona, the University of Arizona, and they've used baking soda as a study for potential treatment of cancer, and they've been testing on mice.
Excellent. Okay, so there is research that shows that baking soda can reduce acidity around where cancer is grown, which can kind of lead to a lower rate of growth in these cancer cells and can inhibit tumor growth, at least in mice.
Exactly. So we're linking to all of these articles on the website at foodstartupspodcast.com/online. It's something I believe in, something I'm interested in. Do your own research and see what you can come up with. I think it's at least worth spending the time to study it and come to your own conclusion.
Yeah, and let me jump in and just say one final thing. Baking soda is sodium bicarbonate, which was first synthesized chemically in like the 1800s and has really become popular since then. Make sure you don't take too much because it's high in sodium, right, Matt? So how much do you take? A teaspoon, a tablespoon?
A little bit less than a teaspoon.
Excellent. A little bit less than a teaspoon a day for Matt. Awesome. All right, Matt. So what else we got planned today for our episode?
Well, another interesting thing I got emailed from my Natural Products LinkedIn group. I took a look at this last week, and this is the new domain extension. So instead of being .com, you can be .organic.
Wow. Okay. And this might be the first useful thing that a LinkedIn group has ever provided
It
in
might
terms
be.
of value. Because sometimes my inbox used to be just flooded with LinkedIn requests to transfer money from Nigeria and things like that.
Oh, you didn't do that? Yeah, I didn't do it either. But, but let me tell you about this .organic domain. Now, I'm just not sure if it has value. I would say perhaps it could have value for some companies. They state that they have to verify that you're actually part of the organic community. Who knows how strict the requirements are. There's tons and tons of top-level domains that have emerged, and it still seems that .com is by far the most popular. So I think it's something that maybe you could consider. I think if you're focused on an ingredient, an organic ingredient, it may not be a bad domain, but you're going to have to do marketing around it. It's not just bean.organic is all of a sudden going to get you tons and tons of traffic.
Absolutely. I think that from what I've heard, there are certain sort of domain appendages. Matt, what do you call them as far as these
They're called top-level domain extensions, TLD extensions.
Okay, so I'll refer to them, these domain extensions. Some of them are more successful than others. For example, .co is really successful, but maybe .marketing, which I know of as well, or .organic won't be so successful. But at the same time, if you're passionate about organic, if it's your brand, it's probably not a bad idea.
Yeah, and true story, when we were planning the website for the podcast, Danny went ahead and bought foodstartupspodcast.biz. But I later talked him into foodstartupspodcast.com.
This is a typical noob error, and that's why Matt needs to sign off on all of our financial investments, because sometimes Danny can get a little bit click happy.
That's right. Well, Danny, let's move into the main topic today, selling your food product online.
Great. Now that sounds pretty good. Selling food online. I love that. How does that work?
So, yeah, well, we're still trying to get better and better at it, but it's a huge topic. And we want to talk about you're starting up your business and you want to generate maybe some sales, some leads, some visibility online. How do you do that? And I think the most important thing to start out with for this episode, and we're going to keep referring back to this, what is your goal?
Great. Yeah. Every one of us, I think, has 20 or 30 friends that have invested tons of money in a website that never pans out for them. Never pans out for them because the functionality isn't there, because their web designers end up jumping ship, because of all these different things, because websites are still a good website, an effective website is still relatively hard to make. But usually 90% of the time, the problems start with the fact that people don't realize what they want from a website. They want it to be bigger or better than their competition. In effect, they don't actually think effectively what their website's going to be used for. Right, Matt?
Yes, so they may not have the purpose, but even on top of that, Danny, another section of startups and companies that fail in their online marketing is not just that their website may be fine, but the problem could be that no one knows about their website. No one can find their website in Google. They don't have any press pointing them there. So if no one knows about the best website in the world, it's not going to have too much value.
Absolutely. So that means there is an art to marketing, and there's an art to knowing how to appear in Google in organic search results. There's an art to communication that actually leads your website to have the value to be up to where it should be so that people are actually accessing it. I think that's kind of the theory behind that.
Right. And Danny, we may not even recommend today for all users to start with a website, maybe a very, very simple website. But when we come to goals, some of the goals starting out, the first one is your goal just to test the market. And in that case, it may be better to go just selling your products on Amazon.
Great. And so Amazon is a great tool that Matt mentioned. It's become extraordinarily popular to sell your products on Amazon.com. And there are some reasons for that. There are some reasons why it could be a better option than actually developing a website. Amazon can be extraordinarily effective in terms of it gives you one of the largest marketplaces and one of the largest consumer bases in the world. What are some other ways? We'll talk about some advantages and disadvantages of Amazon. What are some of the other kind of goals that we want to kind of get into? Some other goals for marketing yourself online?
Sure. Maybe a company has a little bit more proof of their concept and they're ready to develop their brand. They want to create their brand, and whether it's a product line or just one or two products, they want to really get visibility for their brand. So in that case, it would be better to have your own website. Why is that? Because if you're trying to develop a brand, you want to create a mailing list. You want people to associate with your brand. You want to get it seen in front of other people's eyes. Now, with Amazon, it's going to be a little bit more difficult because while they will see your brand, they're going to see all the competition there. So it's very difficult to bring them into your store when all the competition is right next and are suggested products to buy.
Right. And what about companies that only do business with other businesses? So B2B, or what about if you're a chef that is a consultant or does special events? What are some other things where if you're not going the e-commerce route, what should you be doing there?
If you're not going the e-commerce route, I'd still recommend getting your own website, potentially looking for directories. It all depends what type of B2B stuff you're doing, but your website will be a great place to generate leads. You're really trying to generate leads for new B2B sales. And you're also going to want to look at getting testimonials, which we will talk about later.
Great. Okay. So great. We've talked about what is your goal, what's going on with the actions that you want to get from your website, or what kind of presence do you want to have online. And let's move along to how to get set up. Okay, so let's say we've kind of answered these basic questions and we are interested in, let's say I'm a small business owner that has a food product that I want to distribute around the country in stores and also online. Okay, so I've decided I want to have a website. How do I do it? What's going on there, Matt?
So first off, you're going to have to buy your domain, buy your .com domain or .whatever or .organic at GoDaddy.com or any domain register. That's the first thing. Now, there are a variety of options, and there is no better option. It all depends on what you are looking to do. But for one cheaper way to get started would be getting a WordPress site, which is the popular content platform, and getting a plugin for an online store.
Great. I've heard a lot about these online stores and these online plugins because a lot of people, they don't like commissions. They like to pay maybe a one-time fee to get set up. What do you prefer and how do you break these down? Let's say I'm a noob that wants to test something out for 3 weeks or a month to kind of see if maybe you get some hits and I get some traffic, or maybe I know that I'm going to put in maybe a solid 2 years into developing out a brand. How do I weigh out the different options for things like hosting? So yeah, just the e-commerce store.
Sure. So for newbies, I would recommend maybe going for a WordPress site with a plugin, and this you can set up pretty easily. You're going to have to find hosting, but there's like WP Engine or Bluehost, which is going to be somewhere around $4 to $5 a month, and it's not too hard to hook up. It's very easy to customize and set up with the plugin. I think longer term, you're going to want to look at something like BigCommerce or Shopify. And the big difference here is they are your store solutions. All you have to do is point your domain to BigCommerce or Shopify, and you don't need hosting. But they're a little bit more expensive. And Shopify, if you go for the $15 a month option, there will be a transaction fee in addition to accepting payments, but it's a lot safer. And for long term, I think a WordPress store for the long term is not something I would personally recommend, but it could work. I mean, I'd say the reason I would not recommend it is you're going to need to have like a web guy, because the problem with WordPress security is plugins. So what does that mean? WordPress is a platform, but all the plugins are from third parties. So I would say someone just starting out, you could just install tons and tons of plugins, but the more plugins you install, the greater risk you have of a security breach, because there's so many different parties, and a plugin could be from a very, very small company that doesn't update or doesn't have much priority. Whereas with BigCommerce and Shopify, it's just them. They manage the whole thing.
Yeah, and so they have, I would say, an incentive to keep up with developing technology. They have an incentive to provide you with a great platform, and they're going to know about any issues with security as soon as possible. Whereas a small plugin that might promote some sort of threat, they might not be around. A lot of plugins are created by small-time developers or by developers that are just doing things as a hobby.
Right. Now, if you really, really want to test something on the cheap and literally set up something in 30 minutes, I'm going to give you an option here. And this is without even buying a website. All you have to do is sign up for a service called Wufoo, and they, WUFOO, linked on our website, and they have all different types of forms, and they help you create forms. They can even host the forms, and then sign up for a payment processing service, right, called Stripe, and So Wufoo and Stripe, they both integrate with each other. So all of a sudden you can set up a form that accepts payments without even having a website. So if we're talking about something really quick, that would be a very, very fast option.
Cool. And Stripe, what is Stripe?
Stripe is, I guess you would say it's a payment gateway. But basically, so Danny, what happens? So even if you sign up for Shopify or BigCommerce or any types of shopping cart platforms, they're not going to process the order for you. You need a payment gateway. That's another third party that comes in and processes the payments for you. And they allow you to receive credit cards, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. And so is that sort of like PayPal?
Yeah. And PayPal has their own payment gateway, so they're actually a competitor to Stripe.
Awesome. Okay. So that sounds pretty good. If you want to get up and running, if you want to feel if you've got a store up and running, you set up a Wufoo and Stripe, and then you might want to worry about how to do shipping and stuff like that a little bit later. Things like that can get a little bit complicated.
That's right. Now, if you're going with your website or your own domain, the other thing you're going to want to install starting out is Google Analytics. And this is a free service from Google that basically tells you, how did people come to my website? Did they find me via Google? Did they get referred by Facebook from a blog? Did they just type it into their browser? And then once they were on their website, what did they do? Did they click around? How long did they spend on the site? Did they leave? All those types of answers you can get. So any type of thing where you have your own website, I highly recommend putting on Google Analytics. It's free and it's definitely worthwhile. But Danny, you brought us to another point, because there comes the part of fulfilling an order. And depending on the scale of your launch, Danny, if you're going to sell 10 sets of grandma's cookies, you could probably go to UPS or the post office yourself and manually fulfill it. But what if you want to have something set up seamlessly, where anytime the order comes in, it gets sent out without you having to do anything?
Right. And let me just jump in and I don't want us to get too ahead of ourselves. So grandma's cookies, okay, let's say that I want somebody to handle these 10 orders. The first step, right, is know where those orders are going to. And unless you have a flat fee that you've set where you know you're not losing money at your checkout process, you need to have a setup where you can figure out how much you're paying for shipping with the shipping services you're using.
That's correct. And with one fulfillment center that I've visited and am going to work with, what they do, they have certain programs where you can get the average of shipping. Because, Danny, just so you know, I don't know if it's in the continental United States if you want to calculate the exact shipping cost every time. But more likely, you want to set a price that would be an average. So if you know that if you can just say guesstimate, you can get to the shipping being about $4.50 as opposed to charging $5 to California and $3.20 to New Jersey, you probably want to have a flat rate because it would make it really complicated within the shopping cart.
Okay, that's interesting. So you would choose to not have things calculated right away. So you would rather have, let's say, $5 flat rate shipping rather than actually have to have these checkout fees that are complicated where the calculator has to calculate this stuff, where sometimes it might be off. So a $5 rate, say, might be better. It might make more sense for customers. It might make things simpler. Might make your cost breakdowns cleaner and better.
Yeah, if we're just talking about buying the same SKU, the same product, I think it looks a little bit cleaner than saying to California $2.22, to New York $4.86. But that's just my opinion. It all depends on what you're selling.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, let's move on a little bit. So let's say we've evaluated, we've come a long way already. All right. So we've figured out what we want our website to do, what it's going to offer. We've figured out that, listen, let's say we want to do some testing. We can go with Wufoo, and maybe we want to go with WordPress for a little while, but it might be better to move over to Shopify later on. All right, and now we kind of have some of our shipping set up. So what are some of the other things that we should be doing at this point, Matt, as far as just figuring out who our customers are, doing any more tracking? What's next?
All right. Well, I'd say with the website, you're going to want to get into some type of advertising. And this could be something, we'll say organic, with SEO, which is search engine optimization, which many of you may know. And that's really trying to rank for your product so that when people are searching online, that in Google and the natural results that you see on the left-hand side, that you show up.
Gotcha. Okay. And are you going to want to be setting a certain budget? What do I do? Do I test things out for $50? Do I test things out for 2 months? How? And, I guess as I'm talking to you about this, I guess we're going to go back to this idea of what's your goal. But from your experience, what can you tell us about how do you define, track, measure success?
Sure. And so I just brought up SEO, which is the free. And when you talk about goals, SEO takes a little bit longer because these are determined by Google's algorithm. And I would think that's more a goal if you plan on being in it for the long term. If you're doing a very quick test where you want to see if something works, you're probably going to be better off using AdWords or Facebook ads.
Excellent. And any difference, any preference on the AdWords or on Facebook ads? Facebook ads might make more sense because a lot of the time people have a really strong connection with food, and so maybe social networks are better. What do you think?
Again, it all depends on what you're doing, the type of product you have. I would say that AdWords can be very, very good. We talked about B2B. I mean, AdWords is where you want to go for B2B because what happens if you're selling a $7 product and you want Google AdWords to bring you sales and make you money? It's going to be really tough because you have to think about your cost, and a lot of times the cost per click, which is the cost you pay every time someone clicks on the ad, is very high. Now, if you're sourcing an ingredient or you're selling something to restaurants where a sale is over a couple $1,000s, AdWords might be a very, very good solution.
Great. And so let's take a look, if we can, let's take a look at a few examples maybe. I wanted to take a look at a company that I know very well because of the fact that, well, we've talked about them a bunch, and we've also, us being superfood guys, we look at them as the guys who source all over the world and have a pretty strong company. Yeah, so Navitas Naturals. If I go into Google and I type in the name of a superfood, I can pick one out of the hat. I can say maca. Am I going to find their advertisements up there? I know they're superfood folks, but do they choose their route? I know we've looked into this a little bit, Matt, so maybe you have some tips or some thoughts there.
Sure, yeah. No, if you type in maca powder, they will show up twice on the first page of results. And this is SEO, right? These aren't ads. Navitas, or Navitas, they have been in it for a long time. And not only does their own website come up, their Amazon product page comes up in the top 10 results.
Wow, okay. Maybe I'm the naive internet marketer here, but have they just worked really hard to produce organic, high quality content that leads them to have high quality search results? Or why are they up there? How can I get up there? I want to be up there.
A couple things here. They have they dedicate a lot of time to digital marketing. That's one thing. I even searched online and saw that some postings for a digital marketing manager at Navitas a few years ago. Looking online, preparing for this podcast, I saw the listing. But more than that, Danny, one of the biggest benefits in Google are time and links. What do I mean by that? Their products have been around for a while, so they've been indexed in Google. Their website's been used for a long time. And then links. I remember reading a Superfoods article on Tim Ferriss, and when they recommend Camu Camu, they put a link to Navitas. So they got a link from Tim Ferriss's blog. So it's really important to get links from high quality sites like the 4-Hour Workweek, blogs, universities, press, anything like that. And the more you get, the better.
Absolutely, yeah. And that the quality matters a lot there. The quality, and then also if you have somebody like Tim Ferriss, who's a very large internet personality, he's going to bring tons of people there. Hey, listen, I can't compete with that. I've just got a small startup going on. What else can I do? How can I kind of evaluate SEO, start testing some things out? Listen, I know that you and I have both read, for example, some popular books like Tim Ferriss's The 4-Hour Workweek. They kind of go into some testing, but is there any specific food relevant things that we should be keeping an eye on here?
I think the best thing to do is study some of the competitors and look for some of the smaller companies and see what they're doing. Like, I wouldn't, just because you're in the same industry is, Navitas, you're probably a lot smarter than them. I would look at some of your competitors and see what they're doing. Are they getting a lot of social media stuff? Are they using Facebook? Are they using Pinterest? Are they using Instagram? Design a strategy around what the competition is doing, and also think about ways to get press. And it could be that they're getting press, but if not, you want to look at, how are they getting social proof? Did they get an article in a publication? Did they get featured in the Washington Post? So now, they can say as seen in the Washington Post. Look at those types of things.
Excellent. Now, hey, let's say that I'm brand new to an industry. How do I know who my competitors are?
I would, honestly, I'd search Google. I think Google's going to show you the competitors. If you could type in the exact type of product you're selling, most of them are going to show up in the first couple pages of Google. Another way to look, your industry, there's probably going to be your product almost definitely in Amazon.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Amazon is a great source. And also, I know that there's a company called SpyFu, SPYFU.com. And they help you basically take a look at kind of a profile. So actually, we'll share Navitas Naturals profile up on that SpyFu has, which lets you know what are they paying for cost per click, who are some of their competitors, or what keywords are they using. So we'll see that on Navitas Naturals page at SpyFu that they actually we'll see some common competitors that are other superfood sourcers in the space, for example. And so, kind of get to see that, through a little bit of digging, through a few resources, you can actually start getting a little bit of an idea of, one, how hard is it to find success online? What are the bigger question is, how do you decide, is it worth it for you to make an investment, and how high of an investment do you want to make if you're trying to sell your products online?
Well, I think when you're talking about advertising and, with SpyFu, always keep in mind that it is just an estimate tool. They don't really know how much other companies are paying. So just take the information as a way to relatively gauge, but know that it's not even close to 100% accurate. Either way, it's a good way to have a relative idea of what's happening. Then I think you want to focus on a very important metric. If your goal is sales, you take a step back. How much do I want to pay for every sale of X food product? If it costs $25 and online, and my price of shipping minus what I pay the credit card company comes out to $15, then there's a $10 margin there. If you can pay $4 for a sale, that works. But if you have to pay $35 to sell one product, then you're losing money.
Great point. Okay, well, Matt, what else are we going to talk about today? So, we talked about a lot of things about how to kind of figure out if you're going in the right direction. Are we going to be focusing on content at this point? Are we going to be focusing, all right, listen, we're seeing that some of the folks that are ahead of us in our sub-industry and our vertical, they're using Facebook a lot. What does that mean? What other stuff are we focusing on at this point?
Well, let's take a step back to two universal things. You mentioned content, and we had touched on social proof. But yeah, you need to tell the story of your brand, especially now with the types of food brands we're working on. You always need to tell a story. You need to have good content, you need to have good copy. But, two universal things to go with that are, first, good product photography. In food, product photography is key because you can tell I've been the amateur there with poor photography compared to a competition that has a nice looking photo. And online, when they can't see it in stores, you need to have very, very good photos.
Absolutely. Yeah, you cannot really compromise with that sort of thing. Now, there are a lot of folks, and I'd love to actually bring a future interviewee on that's going to talk about, how to create photos that are beautiful, and we can do them easily and cheaply. Anyone can do them. Sometimes it's better to invest in professional photography from the get-go because, Matt, you and I both know that, 2 years ago we didn't know anything about photography, but now we've learned a little bit about it. I think it's kind of like you learn as you go, as you develop your food brand, because you're posting things up on Twitter, because you're around a lot of photography, a lot of different instruments a lot. But from the get-go, it would make sense to hire somebody. Would you say that's right?
Again, it depends how long-term we're going, but if you're in it for 2 years, unless you have really good skills on your own, I think you'd have to look into hiring someone. I think a good product photographer is worth it. Now, Denny, the other thing that we also should touch on is the social proof and reviews. I talked about getting mentioned in a paper, but reviews, testimonials for the product. The internet, there's always like a lack of trust, so you have to find a ways to make them trust you. So I think, as seen in certain magazine blogs, and getting reviews and verified reviews, all those things are really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Without a doubt. And, that gets into a whole other topic of PR that we can go into a lot. One thing I just didn't want to bring up, Matt, just for folks out there who are doing things for the first time. By the way, how much do we spend for a photographer? How much do you want to spend for all this? You've done it before, why don't we just share our experiences a little bit about, how we got a website up and running, or, how we, got the photography that we needed. You can go first, of course.
Sure. So for a website, I usually pay around somewhere between $800 to $1,000 to get the site up. I do a little bit of work myself, but it's really the thing that I'm paying for is design, because I know how to add the content, but I need someone to help me with design. And for a photographer, I actually have a buddy who's a photographer, and I basically traded help with him. I helped him out doing some SEO and AdWords stuff, and he did free product photography for me.
Excellent. Yeah, and my experience has been a little bit different, and I think that's in the freelancing landscape, you'll just find that time and time again. So I had an original designer for my cacao brand build out a website for me, as well as building out packaging design and working on a big project. It's working on a project that lasted well over 9 months, and that actually cost with a full website build that had an integration into WooCommerce with plugins for shipping. That cost a total of $5,000. And as far as photography goes, a lot of photography I've done myself. I've also visited cacao farms around Colombia, and I've taken photographers with me. For about 2 days work in Colombia with a top photographer, I paid $500. And I think that was pretty fair. I think that you can do a little bit cheaper. You can do a little bit more expensive. I've heard both numbers. I think that you can also you won't be able to find this with photography, but importantly enough, video editing, you can find very reasonable prices for online on Odesk and on Elance, or you can get videos edited for $100. $100 to $200. So this is all stuff that it's that first expense that I made, that was an expense where I was learning about brand, and so that $5,000 is a large amount of money. But now I've been able to get up a pretty mediocre site. I've made some pretty mediocre websites in my time for about $1,000 as well. So if you're trying to get up a minimum viable product, which might not have a lot of functionality out there, $1,000 sounds like it's something pretty reasonable. Stock photography up there as well.
Think about those numbers. It all depends what you want to do. Going back to the goals, if you're in it for the 1 month test, you're going to go on the lower end. If you're in it for 2 years, you're going to want to go on the higher end. We also talked in the beginning that maybe you don't even need a website. What I meant by that is sometimes you can go to an existing marketplace, right? The most popular one is Amazon, and we've talked about it before in this episode, where to sign up to be a seller there, it's $40 a month, and this $40 a month for having an Amazon selling account allows you to fulfill in one of two different ways, right? We talked about manual and automatic order fulfillment. One of the most popular ways to fulfill on Amazon is you send them your product at a discounted rate because they get very good rates with UPS. You send them all your inventory and they handle everything. And this allows members of Amazon Prime to get free shipping. And it comes out to about 33% of the price of your product, give or take. And that's a way to get exposure into Amazon's market.
Interesting. And okay, so those and there's a calculator, right, that we can kind of take a look at the costs and things out.
That's right. Now, if you go to the FBA fulfillment calculator, which we have linked on foodstartupspodcast.com/online, you can enter any product that's live in your competitor's product, and you can see based on the price they're charging how much Amazon makes and how much is spent on shipping, et cetera, for the product. So it's a great way to figure that out. You also can find out, you don't have to use Amazon's fulfillment. You could fulfill the order yourself. So you could also calculate, X product. If I fulfill this myself, how much would Amazon charge me? And then you can also think about how much you would have to pay on average for shipping.
Another option that you can have that you might want to use for actually generating labels and getting a full email integration is getting a full integration with providers of mail services like stamps.com is shipstation.com, which I would recommend checking out. Definitely. You pay a monthly fee to basically really easily be able to print out different labels, integrate with different e-commerce websites, things like that. It's getting a little bit off topic, but Matt, you want to talk about Abe's real quick and then we'll wrap up?
Sure. So another marketplace you can look into, and this is selective as opposed to Amazon where they let in anybody as long as you fit their written guidelines. But Abe's Organics is another store that I'd called about, and they have two different options as well. The drop ship, and by drop ship meaning that you handle it yourself. Abe's takes a 15% cut. And the vendor ships it however they want to ship it. With their fulfillment program, Abe's takes about 40%, a little bit more than Amazon, but you're on a much more select marketplace. They're not going to have 150 brands of maca.
Cool. So, and they get pretty good traffic, Matt?
Yeah, they are a pretty big company. I mean, not nearly as big as Amazon, but they're a pretty well-known company and do a lot of sales. I don't have data on how many sales they do, but significant enough that I see them mentioned in a lot of places.
Absolutely. Okay. Any parting thoughts, Matt, with our listeners who, are trying to perhaps set up a website of their own, get into having a food online presence?
So yeah, take a look at your product and go back to your goal. Find out, are you ready to go for the long term, or do you just want to run a test? And from there, take a look at all the links we have on our website, play around with them. Most of these services we've talked about offer some type of free trial. So go in, play around with it, and find what you like.
Absolutely. All right, guys, thanks a lot. It was a pleasure to hear about the breakdown of the food online biz, and we'll talk to you soon.
And as always, if you have any questions or comments, find us online at foodstartupspodcast.com.